Blame It on Vanity by Denise Matthews, formerly known as Vanity, Chapter 12. Naturally, all my questions as a young girl were directed to Jesus, such as why was I born and how do I leave this place? I wanted to disappear like most children do when they are in grave danger. I knew Jesus wasn't the one beating on me. Any happiness I felt never lasted any longer than lunch and departed by supper time. Life continued to deal out an empty hand that I no doubt lost every time, so I prayed. I prayed in the morning time, throughout the day, in school, and on the way home. I prayed when I looked into his angry eyes, and I prayed until I fell fast asleep. I needed to be loved. I needed to be comforted at my weakest moments of insecurity, and I was desperate for a loving human touch. Anyone can see that we were different from all the other kids on the block, but in Niagara Falls, New York, we fit in like an old worn-out shoe. On the weekends, Father would pile us into the car and drive us across the Rainbow Bridge. You see, at Grandma's house, no one laughed at us or seemed to care about how we were dressed. No one gave a thought to whether or not we owned our own television set. Those were the days of great escape. Most everyone had holes in their shoes, pockets, and car windows. Some folks spoke a little slang, sang a little tune, and spit on their shoes to make them shine a tad brighter. Everything we owned was already well broken into, including most of what we wore on our feet or backs or in the toy box. Great big green garbage bags packed with hand-me-downs were slung over our shoulders when departing the Bowden's house. We learned to appreciate every little thing that was given to us. It seemed like everyone on the block was a relative. The minute we stepped inside Grandma's place, we shot through the back screen door like dogs chasing cats. The first one to get to the backyard got dibs on the bicycle seat, and everybody else got second dibs on the fender. It didn't bother me much because I was headed straight for the handlebars. I like that dangerous feeling, the kind you get when you race down a hill riding a bike with no hands. We clamped a piece of cardboard on the stalks with a clothespin so it would make that clicking noise. You remember that noise. You weren't cool unless your bike made a whole lot of racket. There were the four of us, counting Doris, our young aunt. Anyway, Patty and Debbie sat on the seat while I rode on the handlebars, and Doris grabbed the fender. The tires eventually blew out and the rubber fell off, so we ended up riding on the steel wheel until the whole bike fell apart. There we were, all together in a small ball rolling on the ground. We had the best belly laugh, and our legs were all tangled up like a game of Twister. The whole day was about pretending. Yes, we were the pretenders. We were all for one and one for all. We were the Four Musketeers, and better yet, we were the Supremes and the Mod Squad, ready to walk the line. Most of our tiny little gang met out in the back alley at the old Caberdem steel mill. I took a big whiff and someone said, "Sure does stink around here." "Yeah, it's all that burnt rubber smoking up in that chimney over there," replied Doris. Hunting down a ball in the neighborhood was our first mission. Kickball was the only game we played, seeing as no one owned a bat. We played till the sky rolled around dark. We ended up taping a badly beaten ball, depleted of all its air, and probably spent more time taping it up than playing. We used black soot to square off 4 bases. All I know was when my turn came, I was going to kick that ball so hard the birds would chirp about it. the birds would chirp about it. After exhausting ourselves silly, we'd sit on the curbside and rest our feet a while and take the splinters out of each other's hands. We'd daydream about what we would do when we grew up and where we'd live. We spent hours hunting for 4-leaf clovers in the tall green grass until the sun went down. We skipped stones into the puddles and threw pennies into ponds, hoping for money trees to grow sky high out in the backyard. We'd watch the sun melt the sky a golden hue and wish to disappear into the clouds. It didn't take long before the wind started whistling and the goosebumps rose up on our arms. There was a closeness we shared with one another, as if to say, "I got your back and I know exactly what you're feeling." Soon somebody was yelling, "Come and eat, kids." Grandma Bowden was bent over the stove, and with a big wooden spoon she stirred up a big batch of boiling black-eyed peas. "Girl, look at that hot pork sausage dancing round in Mama Mabel's pot," said Papa. "Now ain't that nice?" In Grandma's other hand, a burned-up strawberry-colored pot holder held a sweet potato pie. It sure smells good in here," I said, with a fat grin on my face. The collard greens were bubbling up and sitting in a big black iron pot. You know, the kind of pot it takes 2 to carry. It was so hot up in that kitchen I could hear Grandma yelling, "Keep that back screen door open so's I don't faint up in here." A nice cool breeze rushed inside the house, and Granny lifted the hem of her apron and wiped the sweat off her forehead. Somebody bring me my stool so I can sit down at my oven and smother my chicken with gravy. Pick it up, baby. Don't screech the chair across the floor. Her nylons were rolling down to the knees and stuck in place with 2 rubber bands. Now get upstairs, y'all, and wash them faces. Ow, that hurt, cried Doris. I told you stay out of my pot, Granny said, pointing her spoon at Doris. We all scurried at once to wash the soot off our faces and hustled back down to scrape the remains of chocolate left in the bowl and lick the blender's beaters clean. She was baking Daddy's favorite chocolate cake. We were mighty hungry after a long day of playing. One of y'all put that plastic red and white checker tablecloth on the table, Granny said. There's cigarette holes in it, Granny. Just put the Tupperware bowls on top of the holes, honey. That'll be fine. Our eyes popped out real big and our tongues were licking our chins, just waiting for Daddy to cut into that turkey. It was taking forever. He was snoozing in the front room in the big easy chair. Patty, go get your daddy so he can carve up that bird. She would slide big gobs of butter and buttermilk into the potato bowl to give it a sweet, creamy taste. Everybody in town knew about Grandma's cooking. Y'all need to sit up and watch her sometime so you can get yourself a good meal one day. Instead, you're riding around town sneaking up on them boys, she said under her breath. Your daddy go whoop y'all. We ain't playing nothing but kickball, Grandma, honestly. Y'all gonna grow up to be somebodies. Grandma leaned over and poured some Black Label beer into Ajax's bowl. Ajax was his rabbit. Seemed to me like everybody in town was standing around with a paper plate. Watermelon was cut in half, lying on top of a newspaper, and the sweet potato pie was cooling in the window. Cornbread, boiled chitlins, and homemade cranberry sauce sat nicely under my nose. I hated the smell of chitlins, so when she took those things out of the refrigerator instead of cleaning them in the sink, I always found something better to do. Grandma was known to bake the thickest, cheesiest macaroni this side of the country. It would crust hard along the sides of the pan, and we'd wolf it down like mad, bad babies. Our little bellies would burst out the seams of our pants, so we'd find a space on the floor to lie down and take a nap before cleaning up the pots and pans. Or did we clean up first? That was never our favorite part of it. That was never our favorite part of it. Oh well. Daddy had 13 brothers, including himself, and most lived in and out of Grandma's 3-story house. If you happened to come in through the front door, and hardly anybody ever did, the living room was to the right, and just behind the door, a slanted staircase that led up to the bedrooms. After Grandma hung up her apron on an old rusty nail, she headed for the steps. Lord knows she'd been working all day and deserved her rest. There in the corner was her faithful old puffy rocking chair that nobody sat in but she. When she'd sit, teeny-weeny feathers went flying up in the air. Clothes of every color were hanging on 2 lines stretching from one end of the room to the other. White cotton, twin bed, sheets draped the windows as curtains. The whole place was wonderful for playing hide-and-go-seek. Towels were spinning around in the dryer, and I remembered that dryer shaking, making an awful noise. Don't mind the dryer, she'd say. It ain't going nowheres. It's just doing a little dance, that's all. Sometimes I'd sit at the top of the stairs with my hand resting under my chin and watch as she rocked back and forth, spitting into that old tin pail. She chewed incessantly on her chocolate-covered chewing tobacco and spit it back into the bucket. It made a tinkling sound every time it hit the bottom. I often wondered what was the point of chewing on something she eventually would spit out. I didn't get it. Did she or did she not like it? We loved to go down into the basement where all my older uncles and their friends would hang out. They were leaning up against the wall, trying their hardest to be cool. Multicolored beads hung low in the door. Once you push the beads to the side, smoke came rushing out from behind, whisking its way up into my nostrils. This was not a place where one could just enter into without being invited, and whenever we were asked, my heart skipped a few beats faster, just knowing I was going down there to the unknown and the forbidden. No one left until the conversation went dry, or the record player skipped from a dusty needle. I'm reminded of the girls that snuck down in that room, always smiling, batting their false lashes, showing out their pointed peaked fingernails and hot pants. They were wearing yellow halter tops, baby blue bell bottoms, and tangerine lip gloss. You might suppose they were trying to look like Diana Ross and the Supremes, but we knew better. Diana wasn't shopping at the Goodwill. Everyone's a dude sporting an afro and calling it the bush. Our noses barely reached the pool table or the lava lamps, and I remember a light bulb dangling from the ceiling. To Sir with Love played endlessly on the record player, and everybody sang, including me. A torn picture poster of Jesus Christ Superstar was pasted on the wall. I felt as if I had just entered a danger zone where if you touched anything, you might be banned from the room forever. Doris would shout, "Hey everybody, we are putting on a show." Yes, every time we sang, we would be the Supremes. We took the finished cardboard tissue rolls and wrapped them in tin foil and used them as microphones or even as an old hairbrush did the trick. Then we'd dress up in some old raggedy dresses and pretend they were long, slinky gowns. Grandma had a few old church hats with big white flowers, and we tied scarves around them to make them pretty. We wore her fake jewelry beads and draped them around our necks. Dusty red and white patent leather high-heeled shoes by the dozens were crammed in the back of her closet, so we wore a different color on each foot. We sang our rendition of Diana Ross's hit song, Stop in the Name of Love. We weren't very good, and you certainly wouldn't find us on any of the corner marquees, but to us, we were the best thing busting out of Buffalo.